started. I think it's good enough, and we looks like we got most of the people here we hope to have here. So I'm going to introduce our speaker for this evening, Amanda Stahl, and she's going to take us through the freedom paradox. Um, I argued about the name of tonight's meeting when we sent out the invitations. It doesn't really give you a lot of clue as to what it is, but Amanda will explain further. For some of you who are retired already, it's was retirement really what you thought it was? And if you did it over, would you do it differently? And for those of you who have not yet retired, this is hopefully you can not make some mistakes that others have made, be better prepared, and most importantly, have a good mindset about what your expectations are going to be. So with that, I'll introduce Amanda. I'm gonna read. I apologize. Amanda Stahl is the Managing Director of Applied Insights for the Hartford Funds. Amanda's job is to engage and educate financial professionals and their clients about what's going on in the world of financial services and retirement planning and legacy planning and long-term planning, lifestyle planning. Amanda's been with the Hartford since 2024, so a couple of years on her belt. Prior to that, I knew Amanda because she was an associate of mine at Raymond James working in the longevity planning area. And a fun fact about Amanda, she has her master's degree in gerontology. And she joins us tonight from home in St. Petersburg, Florida. Lucky her. And so with that, Amanda, the floor is yours. I will be here in standby and chime in when needed.
Thank you so much, Elliot. And thank you, everybody, for joining. Welcome. We're excited that you're here with us today. And as Elliot said, we are going to be diving into a topic that hits close to home for many of us. Either we're approaching retirement or maybe we've recently retired, and really thinking about how we have this very common belief that retirement equals that ultimate freedom, that we can do whatever we want, whenever we want. But many of us are surprised when we kind of hurdle towards that goal. We're really trying to work towards that freedom, and we find out, hey, leaving full-time work might not be, that key to happiness that we had envisioned, and it can be a little bit of a paradox. We pursue this total freedom, but it doesn't always lead to the fulfillment that we expect. So we're going to peel back some layers, uncover what really makes for a fulfilling retirement journey. And I'm sure many of us have felt kind of the combination of a jumble of excitement and nerves all at once, kind of a weird feeling, but it's not uncommon. It's not uncommon for us to feel that as we are approaching and we're on the verge of retirement. And so, what we did is we pulled financial professionals. The good thing about working with financial professionals, working with somebody like Elliot, you're going to retire once. He's retired hundreds, thousands of times. He's been through this with clients. And so we really wanted to lean on the expertise of the financial advisors that we work with and polled them on how they felt about retirement as they were getting close to that period. 82% said they were feeling both excited and anxious. And there are other stats out there that kind of drive home this point. 56% of Americans surveyed said that they lose sleep thinking about retirement. And an AARP study found among the newly retired, they feel boredom, isolation, loneliness, and even a lack of purpose is common. But why is that? We've been taught that financial readiness is all that we need when in fact there's more. We need to think about the quantitative, but also the qualitative side about retirement. And so, just to give a story here, Dr. Jordan Grumet, he learned about this FIRE movement, the financial independence, retire early. He was a doctor and he was really burned out by the relentless demands of running his own medical practice. And so he dedicated himself to saving aggressively and he achieved financial independence at age 45. He was really excited. He didn't have to worry about sleepless nights and that kind of Sunday dread in the evening, but the reality was different. He said that instead of feeling joy and excitement, he fell into a pit of anxiety and depression. And so we want to help avoid those sorts of pitfalls. And Elliot mentioned we have a really strong relationship with the MIT Age Lab. We're going to talk about some of that research here today. But with all of the presentations that we share with our advisors and with their clients, we partner with different experts in the field. And so for this presentation today, we partnered with Dr. Nancy Schlossberg. She is a leading expert on life transitions and spent 25 years teaching counseling psychology at the University of Maryland. She is now retired, but her daughter says the only thing retired about you is your paycheck. She's still very active, and her research focuses on how adults navigate transitions like retirement, job loss, divorce, and even geographic moves. And so we think about when we're getting into retirement, that could be, leaving a job, perhaps moving to a different geographic location. It really comes into play there. She's written 10 books and had countless conversations with people undergoing change and has gained deep insights into coping with life shifts. One key observation from her research: people often underestimate how much retirement will change their lives. And so she asked the critical question we have up here on the screen: are you as psychologically prepared for retirement as you are financially? Now, when we ask this question, what Dr. Schlossberg finds as well, many people say that they're unsure. They focus really heavily on the financial planning, which is, of course, important, but they give less thought to their emotional and psychological readiness for retirement. But again, her research finds that being psychologically prepared is essential for a fulfilling retirement, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So, today's agenda, we're going to be going through 3 different sections. We've got the missing factor, your psychological portfolio, and then action steps. So with this, we are going to walk through a couple of exercises, some different things that you can do. Elliot and Brooke and team, they're going to send a PDF, a workbook to you that you can use after the call to actually go through, complete some of the exercises. So feel free to kind of jot some things down and get started on them as we walk through it today. But we are going to kind of save everybody time on the call today. Give that to you as a follow-up if that's something that you're interested in completing. So jumping right into the first section, the missing factor. Now, MIT Age Lab researchers conducted a survey to gather people's thoughts and ideas about life after career. They talked to 990 adults in the US, and those adults were asked to provide 5 words describing what they think their life will be like in retirement. Now, 33% of the responses were made up of just 10 words, and those are the 10 words on the screen you can see here. One of the most often mentioned words was freedom. People think, finally, I'll have time to do whatever I want. And some expect that retirement will bring instant happiness and meaningful activities, a leisurely life filled with relaxation and socializing. But often the reality diverges, leaving many experiencing retirement as a prolonged and sometimes monotonous break. Now, when we think about what are the words that we want to use to define retirement and life after full-time work, there is a missing word, and that word is mattering. And I know that sounds like a fake word. I promise it's not made up. As weird as it sounds, it is super important for retirement. Now, the word mattering was coined by Dr. Morris Rosenberg, and he was a colleague of Dr. Schlossberg's at the University of Maryland. He was a sociology professor, and that term mattering, it's the drive to feel noticed, valued, and needed. Now, we get a lot of that out of our full-time work, of course. It's key to behavior, performance, and well-being, as feeling important to others shapes our self-understanding. And when Dr. Schlossberg learned about this, she really got hooked on the idea and learned of it through this study that Dr. Rosenberg, again, her colleague, had done, showing adolescent boys who felt they mattered to parents or school were less delinquent than those who felt ignored. And she later realized that that concept of mattering also deeply applies to aging adults. So, for example, Dr. Schlossberg, again, has had tons of conversations with people over the years, and one of them was with an individual named Jules, a police officer in a major city. He retired from, again, a rewarding career as a police officer, and he said, I turned in my badge, that was that. There was nothing to prepare him psychologically for retirement. He moved away, again, that geographical change in location, and he took a few part time jobs, but the work was menial. It made him realize what he missed about his former job. He really missed the camaraderie, the variety, of course, you can imagine as a police officer, and of course, making a positive impact. That abrupt transition to retirement really led to a difficulty to adapt and frustration, which eventually turned into depression. And research shows that retirees are more likely to experience depression compared to those who are still working. Again, part of that is not feeling like we matter, not having that purpose. Ultimately, Jules had a success story. He had a family member that helped him find work at a very exclusive resort as an assistant manager, and that job made him feel like he mattered again. And so, like Jules, we might not recognize the significance of mattering in our lives until it's no longer there. So, through Dr. Schlossberg's research, she has identified 5 components of mattering. Now, as I walk through each of these, maybe kind of give yourself a little score. Think, how am I doing on this? Assess your level. Are you feeling are you feeling stronger? Are you feeling weaker on any of these? So, the first one is attention. I feel that I command interest or notice of another person. Then we've got importance. I feel that what I'm doing is important. Appreciation. I feel that people appreciate me for who I am and what I do. Dependence. I feel that people depend on me. And pride. I feel that others are proud of my accomplishments. Now, we talked about Dr. Schlossberg. She's actually in her 90s and again, still very active. But when she retired, she experienced a significant shift in her mattering factor, as she calls it. The transition from her role as a respected professor in Maryland to what she hoped would be a very relaxed and idyllic retirement in sunny Florida with her husband did not go as planned. She really missed the sense of significance that her work provided. And without anything to fill that void, she felt unimportant. She felt in all 5 of these aspects, she was weak. And that makes complete sense. We can get a lot of these 5 aspects out of our full time work. Now, she eventually turned things around, but it took time and it took effort. And of course, with the understanding that our sense of mattering can fluctuate in retirement. Now, let's take a look at how this factor of mattering can affect how people feel when they stop working. So, as that late sociologist I talked about who coined the term mattering, Dr. Rosenberg, says, it has been suggested that one problem of retirement is that one no longer matters. Others no longer depend on us. The reward of retirement involving the end of working can be the punishment of not mattering. Now you can see here half of retirees surveyed age 60 to 69 are considering returning or have returned to the workforce. Almost 1/3 of retirees surveyed were unmotivated and overwhelmed. Now, working or going to work, it's not just about having a job. It's about the tasks that we complete, the challenges, relationships with colleagues, connection to a physical workplace, and daily routines. Losing these aspects can create a void, leading people to wonder if they still matter with all this newfound spare time. Now, we think about these longer retirement periods as well. Social Security data shows that for a couple age 65, there's a 50% chance that at least one of them will live to age 92. And so this can be 20, 25, 30 years in retirement. It's really important to be proactive and think about how we're going to spend that time and how we're going to find our purpose. You might be thinking, I don't care about matter. I don't want to matter. I just want to relax. I want to chill out. And Dr. Schlossberg says that's great. Some people thrive on that kind of retirement, but it doesn't work for everyone. And many people are happier when they feel that they matter. So let's jump into the next section here, the psychological portfolio. We're going to talk about how we can boost our sense of mattering in retirement. So, of course, as we approach retirement and we're preparing for this big transition, many of us are monitoring our financial portfolios. And in a similar vein, Dr. Schlossberg recommends that we incorporate regular checkups on our psychological portfolio. Many of us don't realize that we even have a psychological portfolio, but it's made up of three sections that we're going to get into, thinking about identity, relationships, and purpose. Now, when Dr. Schlossberg interviewed retirees who were feeling challenged adjusting to life after retirement, they often mentioned the struggle with their identity, a loss of purpose, and changes in their relationships. These three elements collectively form what she calls your psychological portfolio. And these are essential resources for managing major life transitions, especially retirement. So let's take a deeper dive into each of these different sections. First off, we've got identity. I'm guessing that in your work, many of you had a business card that included your job title. And oftentimes, when we meet someone new, and we're kind of telling them about ourselves, we get the question and we're asked to define ourselves by our professions. I'm a lawyer, I'm a contractor, I'm a teacher. And for many retirees, losing their professional identity is one of their biggest challenges and can really disrupt our sense of self. So, how do we introduce ourselves when we've stopped working? And if we had a business card after we stopped working, what would it say? Now, people say I'm retired, but that just indicates something that we no longer do. We're no longer working full time. And sometimes just being identified as a retiree can feel diminishing. It may suggest a lack of a defined role or purpose, and that can lead to feeling overlooked or undervalued, as if we're no longer contributing and achieving the way that we did during our working years. But we know that's not true. We just want to build that distinct identity in retirement to help enhance our sense of mattering. That identity includes what we do, our personality traits, and our worldview. So perhaps a business card would say something like a caring grandmother, a volunteer specialist, a gardener extraordinaire. If the title of retiree doesn't sit well with you, don't worry. We have an exercise that I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation that can help you to create your distinct identity. And this is what we call Who Are You? So, again, we'll take a look and walk through this, but we're going to share a workbook with you after the fact where you can take your time, look through this, and help to create your own identity using this exercise. So, if we want to better establish our sense of identity in retirement, we need to give some thought as to who we are. What are our priorities, our passions, our personality, and looking at lists like this can help. So the words listed under each category, they're just meant to spark your thinking. Of course, it's not all encompassing. And what we would encourage you to do when you get the workbook is take a look, read through these, perhaps jot down some other words, ponder other words that you'd use to describe yourself, add them to the list. There are no right or wrong words to use, and you don't have to pick a word from every category. So when you do this, we would say aim for at least 20 words and then mark the ones that seem most relevant and try to then narrow those down to 5 to 7 words. So again, it's not meant to be all encompassing, but rather a quick way to let others know a little bit about you. And so in this example, we've gone ahead, we've narrowed the list down. We have 6 words here. And so, what this individual has chosen in terms of what relates to them, again, they didn't pick from every category. That's okay. They selected reading, outdoorsy, yoga, outgoing, grandparent, and volunteer. And what we can do from there is create an acronym. So, when we think about these words, this is just supposed to be a meaningful method that we can share more about ourselves in future conversations. So we call it a way-cronym. So way, who are you? Cronym, the way-cronym. And so when we pick these 6 highlighted words, we're going to just then pick an easy way to recall and relay your identity. So again, this one, they chose groovy, grandparent, reading, outdoorsy, outgoing, volunteer, and yoga. And so again, we'll share this after the fact with you. Take a look, spend a few minutes developing your acronym as a way to hone in and think about what am I passionate about? What are my personality traits? What are different things that I want to pull from to continue to find that purpose and feel that I matter in retirement? So, for example, here, grandparent, maybe they want to make sure they're spending time with their grandkids and they work that into the weekly schedule. Reading, monthly book club, outdoorsy, making sure they take a new hike once a quarter, outgoing, that can kind of play into a lot of different things. Volunteering, what is an organization that you're passionate about where you could give your time? And then yoga, again, maybe it's a weekly yoga class. So, the next piece we're going to talk about here is relationships. There are four main types of relationships, and they can change in importance throughout our lives. For example, when you leave a job, you might lose touch with work friends. And I can just tell from my own experience, Elliot mentioned I previously was with Raymond James. I was there for 10 years, very close friendships with people that I'd worked with for a long time. And it takes effort to keep in touch with those people when you know you're not seeing them in the office on a regular basis. So those things can kind of change. There's a dynamic there. Think about maybe you're in your early 20s, maybe friendship is super important to you. Eventually, you meet a significant other, start having kids, and so maybe family becomes more prominent. You might have a lot of friends at your kids' soccer games, but that can shrink over time. Everyone's experience is different, but you kind of get the idea. Things ebb and flow. And the biggest issue that Dr. Schlossberg sees is that when people leave work, they think their relationships will stay the same and that everything will just work out. They don't reach out to the community. Their family might be spread out all over the place, more so than, in the past, that's more and more prevalent. They might only have a few friends outside of work and they don't realize there's a big gap in their social circle. And we need to find new relationships to replace or complement those work friendships that may fade over time. So, again, kind of thinking about these four buckets we've got work or volunteering, community, family, and friends. Some people might think, hey, I don't have a lot of friends, but I'll always have my family. Just keep in mind, family members might not be as available or willing to spend as much time with us as we'd hope. We're retired. They're not. They don't have as much free time in some cases. And research shows that supportive friendships are a stronger predictor of well being as we age than family connections. There was a study out of Michigan State University found that friendships become more important to our happiness and health over time. And in older adults, friendships are a stronger predictor of health and happiness than family relationships. So there is a way that we can really assess the strength of our relationships by thinking about how close we are to the people in our lives. Like we've talked about, relationships are crucial for your emotional well-being. They come in various forms, from casual acquaintances to deep, meaningful connections, and each type plays a role in your happiness. Strengthening those relationships can lead to a more fulfilling retirement. And Dr. Schlossberg says it's good to have a mix of friends in each of these categories. So we have casual connections. Those are people you interact with occasionally, maybe those you bump into at a community center, a work, volunteer group, or the grocery store. Then we've got significant relationships. Those are friends, family, and neighbors who matter to you, but aren't as closely connected to you as that inner circle. So it could be a friend that you see frequently or a sibling that you stay in regular contact with, but maybe aren't seeing on talking to on a daily basis. And then you've got close relationships. Those are your most cherished friends and family, the ones you trust and rely on the most. So those are those people, that best friend, that sibling that you call when you need advice or support. And so you might think, I'm pretty happy with my relationships. It would be great if we could freeze a point in time and say, we love our life and relationships right now. It's always going to be like this. But what we've seen in research with the MIT Age Lab is that it's not always going to stay the same. As we get older, things change. Our surroundings, our circumstances, and our relationships. Friends might move away, we might move away. That's something that's really important to think about as we think about where we might want to live in retirement. Do we have that social network in place? And so it's normal for us to lose friendships as we get older and for social circles to shrink. So, what can happen is that this is a study, it's a trend line of who we spend time with as we age. So, you can see here as we get older, this is the minutes each day that we spend. These are Americans spending time with different people. So, as we age, many spend more time alone. So, you can see here at age 35, people spend an average of 4.4 hours alone daily. But by age 65, that number increases to 7.4 hours. And that can be a problem. Researchers have found that loneliness can be as harmful as smoking 15 cigarettes a day and can increase the risk of premature death by 50%. We also know, and there are a lot of studies that support that losing social connections in retirement can lead to cognitive decline. And so we really can sometimes underestimate the value of relationships with colleagues, but we end up really missing them dearly after retiring because we miss those social ties. While less than 30% of pre-retirees anticipate missing social interaction at work, over 60% of retirees list it as a missed aspect, surpassing even the paycheck by only 20%. So, then we're going to jump into the next piece, which is purpose. Your purpose really starts with your passion. And we've all been encouraged to find our passion, find your why, but we're not really told how to do it. Now, you can see here a quote from James Clear. He is a best-selling author and a self-help expert, excuse me. Passion is a feeling that follows action. It tends to be created or discovered, not predicted or planned. You don't find your passion, it finds you as you get in the mix and try different things. So instead of thinking about what you want to do and then doing it, Clear, he emphasizes the importance of diving in head first. Passion can often emerge unexpectedly while you're engaged in different activities. And we don't want to view it as a treasure hunt. It's more so that byproduct of taking action. So when we're thinking about finding our passion, we break it down into self-discovery and service. So it's really two key ingredients: discovering your passion and choosing a retirement path that fits within it. Passion is about what excites and energizes you, and path is about giving that energy a direction, a way to structure our retirement journey. When you bring those together, we get a clear and meaningful sense of purpose for this next chapter of life. So, Dr. Schlossberg points out that exploring your passions is essential whether you're still working or already retired. Don't wait for inspiration to strike. Start trying things, even small things, and notice what sparks your interest. It's all about being open to new experiences, building a strong foundation for a fulfilling retirement later on. So when we think about that, we've got two different kinds of passions. There are self, ones that energize us personally, and then others, the ones that make a difference for others. Most of us lean naturally toward that others piece, the service piece, but both sides are important for a balanced, rewarding retirement. So when we think about self-oriented activities, these are things that enrich and fulfill us, like creativity, learning, leisure, and play. Things like painting, writing, diving into a new subject, traveling, enjoying music, or just having fun. These passions keep our minds sharp and our hearts engaged. Use that WAKE acronym we talked about to help uncover these. And then we've got others oriented activities. Passion often comes from contributing to others through work, volunteering, or family. Many people find deep satisfaction in mentoring, giving back, or being there for loved ones. And these activities create a sense of purpose that extends beyond ourselves. So when we talk about mattering, it's not just about what matters to me, but what I mean to others. So in terms of opportunities to help others, studies show that retirees who volunteer regularly age more slowly and can prevent cognitive decline by staying active and engaged without the stress of a full-time job. Now, sometimes our passions will blend both sides. We might be deeply involved with family or find a volunteer role that's both fun and meaningful. That's the piece that we like to find when retirement moves beyond simply filling our time and becomes a journey of excitement, purpose, and connection. So now that we've taken a deeper dive and looked at identity, relationships, and purpose, we want to consider the second part, that retirement path. So we have here 6 major paths that are identified by Dr. Schlossberg. And as I discuss each one, make a mental note of what one seems to fit you. Again, this and the definitions for them will be in the workbook that we're going to share after the fact. So let's start with the continuers. They say they're just going to do what they've always done, but a little differently. So, this is a CEO who consults back to the business. It may be the same line of work, but their role is modified in some way. Then we've got the involved spectators. They're not working, but still follow their old industry, catching the latest news, even though they're technically out of the game. Then adventurers. They do something completely different. They change careers, learn something new, or finally pursue that dream hobby. And then we've got the easy gliders. They just go with the flow. You ride the wave. Then we've got retreaters, which are kind of broken down into two types. The first is the retreater who takes a break but looks forward to doing something else. I've had this conversation with clients. There was one who was a physician working in a hospital during COVID and everything, and he said, "I just want to go in the woods for 2 years and not talk to anybody." He really wanted to take that break, which is completely understandable after a very high pressure career. But we want to stress the importance of coming back and finding purpose and community after you take that break. Because that second type of retreater, the person that just steps away and says, "I don't really want to do anything," that can be very risky. It can really have an effect on mood and an effect on our mental and our brain health as we age. And then the last path we have here is the searchers. Many people identify themselves as searchers. They know they want to do something, but they haven't necessarily figured out what it is quite yet. Or maybe they sense, something needs to change. I just can't exactly pinpoint what that is yet. And so hopefully this conversation and taking a look at the workbook will inspire those searchers on the call to think a little more seriously about it. Now that wraps up our second section, which is purpose. And next we're going to get into some action steps to help strengthen the psychological portfolio and boost that mattering factor. So, now that you're familiar with the different aspects of a psychological portfolio, it's time to assess your own. Here are some questions that we'll kind of walk through. Again, just think through these, make some notes. This will all be in the workbook for you to complete after the call. But would you rate yourself as very strong, somewhere in the middle, or very weak? So we've got our identity and knowing yourself. Do you have a strong sense of self-worth and significance? Do you believe you hold value to others? Are you comfortable saying, "I'm retirement," or "I'm contemplating retirement, I'm getting close to retirement"? Then your relationships. I know I matter to others, and I know who matters to me. Are you part of a community that can fill the void left by your former work community? Do you have someone to share your daily experiences and deepest thoughts with? Have your personal relationships been unexpectedly altered by retirement? And that could also be the spouse, the partner in the home. The dynamic can really change when somebody is all of a sudden in the house all the time and they didn't used to be. So that can have an effect on the relationship as well. And then purpose. I know where I'm going. Do you feel a sense of purpose and motivation to start each day? Do you have a place where your presence is anticipated and appreciated? And have you considered strategies for cultivating a new sense of purpose? Now, there's no way to get this down perfectly. You're probably not going to get to the point where you say, "I've got a perfect portfolio. I've got the identity, the relationships, the purpose all figured out." And that's not necessarily the goal. We need to revisit this, on an ongoing basis, checking in from time to time to make sure that we're still on track and seeing how we're doing, improving where we need to. There are 3 parts here, but they're all interconnected. And enhancing one area can often boost the others and help increase our sense of mattering. So a few action steps to help strengthen the identity. Complete that acronym we talked about. Share it with others. Monitor over time. Maybe sometimes that will change. Again, keep an eye on it. Update it if your priorities change. Strengthen your relationships. So a few ways to reinforce the relationships part of your psychological portfolio. Saying yes to invitations. I think it's Shonda Rhimes. She wrote a book called The Year of Yes, where she said yes to everything. So if you need some inspiration, maybe check that out. It's easy to decline and just say no, but try to say yes more often. Accepting invitations helps build and strengthen relationships through shared experiences and deeper connections. Then we've got the 3 R's: repot, ritual, and rekindle. So repot. Like a live plant, some friendships flourish when given room to grow beyond those initial containers. So for instance, if you had a coworker who enjoys the outdoors, invite them out for a weekend hike. It's a great way to deepen those connections and enjoy new experiences together. Ritual. Consistency is essential to building and maintaining friendships. If you'd like to befriend or stay connected to someone, try meeting up on a weekly basis. It could be attending a class or meeting for lunch, but the key elements of building friendships are being intentional, available, and reliable. It takes time, 40 to 60 hours for an acquaintance to become a casual friend, and about 200 hours to become close friends. So, getting together on a regular basis, having those meaningful conversations, and being open can help speed that process up a little bit. And then rekindle, reconnecting with old friends. Sometimes it can feel like picking up where you left off. And of course, that history makes it easier to rekindle the relationship and create new memories together. And then we've got the 7 pillars of friendship. This is from Robin Dunbar. It suggests that the more categories you share with someone, the closer you feel to them and the more likely you are to act kindly towards them. So those 7 pillars are language or dialect, place of origin, educational trajectory, hobbies and interests, values, musical tastes, and sense of humor. So it's that concept, birds of a feather flock together. So any combination of those can create a really strong friendship. So it's really important again to think about what we have in common with people, meeting like-minded individuals, perhaps at a volunteer opportunity that we feel strongly about. That helps. Different things there, different exercise classes or bridge club or mahjong or whatever it might be is a good way again to meet those like-minded individuals. And then the last piece of strengthening your purpose. So we want to explore those self and others oriented passions. So we have a list of ideas in the workbook, but here are things like AARP job board, which are part-time jobs for retirees, volunteering, and using things like meetup.com to find people who are interested in similar activities, local causes, local groups, etc. So take a look at those. And then seek a retirement path. Each of the 6 retirement paths we discussed can act as a guide for that retired life and help you make more specific decisions about your future. Those paths, again, are in the workbook. So that covers our action steps to boost the psychological portfolio. And I do want to touch on as well some common roadblocks that you might run into. So, first roadblock we've got here, money does not equal happiness. Many people believe that financial security guarantees that amazing retirement. Of course, it's extremely important, but even with ample savings, some retirees find themselves lacking fulfillment. So, really important to think about that mattering factor, that qualitative piece alongside the quantitative piece of retirement. Roadblock number 2, unrealistic expectations. So, we're eagerly awaiting that retirement period, but the reality of it can be a little more complex than we anticipate. And so we take years of planning. It can lead to disappointment if things don't immediately fall into place. It can take time to get that groove, find those different things that we feel passionate about. And so we don't want to expect that perfectly smooth transition. Have those realistic expectations, give yourself time to adjust. This can include acknowledging the loss of a work identity, exploring new possibilities, and adapting to a new routine. Roadblock number 3, social clocks. So those are kind of those hints we pick up on about when it's the right time to do certain things like getting our driver's license, getting a job, tying the knot. Those social clocks can also tell us when it's time to retire. And these clocks can make us question ourselves with thoughts like, am I too young to retire? Or shouldn't I be retired by now? Those societal expectations can really hold us back. We are not too old to start a new career, and we're not too young to retire and explore those passions. We don't want to let outside pressures limit us. And so, no matter the age, there are always chances for our personal growth, exploration, and change. And then the last roadblock is lack of structure. Of course, retirement brings a level of freedom that we have not experienced probably in decades, and there's no daily schedule. Some embrace it, and others find the lack of structure can lead to boredom or a lack of purpose, and met with many underestimating how much free time they'll have. So it's really important to balance structure and flexibility, mapping out the week with hobbies, social activities, commitments, and relaxation. We know that's important. created to a fulfilling rhythm tailored to you. Now, we will note one thing: beware of watching too much TV. Research from the MIT Age Lab finds that retirees go from watching about 104 minutes of TV a day when they're working, it jumps up to 4 hours a day. And so studies have linked that higher, watch number of hours watching TV links it to things like dementia, depression, and Parkinson's. So we don't want to spend too much time in front of the TV. We want to prioritize those meaningful activities to ensure your freedom enriches your life. So with that, we're at the conclusion of the presentation here. I am happy to answer any questions that are coming up. Elliot, if there's anything that you would like to add, now's a great time.
Well, thank you, Amanda. The great comments and generally speaking, great words of wisdom. So we will open it up for questions. The Zoom has a raise your hand feature in the bottom middle of your screen. If you'd like to ask any questions or make any comments, if you raise your hand, I would unmute you and you would have the opportunity to speak should you so desire. And so right now we have no questions from the audience. So I'll have one to maybe get us started. And that is, I'll ask a where question as opposed to a who or a why. Are there best places to go? We hear about things like, I'll just use an example, the senior center. It seems like every town has a senior center, and I've been in a couple of them, and they're not generally the most engaging of places. And so, is there any research on there as to the where to go to, expand your social circles?
Sure. I think it's important to explore and try different things like Dr. Schlossberg talks about to find what resonates with you. So maybe it's not that senior center. Maybe it's a place of worship. Maybe it is a pickleball club or whatever, an indoor pickleball spot where you can join a team. Maybe it's volunteering at your grandchildren's school. I mean, it varies so much. There's so much out there. So it's thinking about what am I going to enjoy doing? You don't want to, it's not work. You don't have to do
Right.
it. You don't
So
have to
it's
get
follow
up
your
and
passion.
exactly, exactly. And when we're thinking
Okay.
about those transitions too, I'll just add, if you have the opportunity to work with your current employer and go part-time and kind of make that transition, that can be really, really helpful for people so that we're not just abruptly leaving that full-time work. I mean, I can just give you the example. My father, he was a business owner. He sold his business. He had to stay on for 2 years. We're getting to that 2 year point where it's like, so what are you going to do now? And I'm telling him, maybe you need to start working 40 hours a week, 30 hours a week, going in 4 days a week, whatever it might be, to start that transition because we don't want to, be in these high pressure jobs where we're working many hours a week, but we are finding that purpose. And then it's all of a sudden, what do I do with all of this time? It can be a tough transition.
Right. Okay. So we did get a question from the audience,
Okay, awesome.
and this is about the guide, the
Yes.
workbook, if you will. So the question is, will the guide include references for continued study and or knowledge?
Great question. So will cite a bunch of sources in that guidebook, and then Dr. Schlossberg has quite a few books on this topic. I'm happy to take a look and send over a specific recommendation to Elliot that we can get over to you all. But she is definitely an expert in this topic, and I would definitely recommend some of her writings if that's of interest.
Great. Thank you. And hopefully that answers your question. And if you want to ask a follow-up, go right ahead and we'll get that answered. But it looks like we took care of that one. And do we have another question? We got a thank you, Amanda,
Thank
from
you.
from the audience. So
Thanks. Happy to do it.
that's it. All right. Well, so as we wrap up tonight, and again, if anybody has any last questions as we're finishing, by all means, fine. So what's going to happen is Brooke will follow up, and the workbook is going to be emailed. Is that correct, Brooke? Okay, emailed. For those of you who, once you receive the emailed copy, you look at it on the screen. If you say, I'd really like a printed copy, please let us know. We're happy to mail you one. if need be, no problem at all. And I'm happy to go through these workbooks with any of you that would like to. And if you have follow-up questions for Amanda or people at the Hartford on the Applied Insights team, by all means, feel free to email us and we'll make sure those questions get forwarded later on. So, here's my close. I see we've got a kind of a mix of people on this call. I'll call them half retirees and half working people. And so for your retirees, if you're having a great time, keep having a great time. Don't worry about all this stuff, But if life's a little hard and you're stressing and, these are great things to work on to hopefully get a little relief and that you don't have to do all of them. If you pick one and do that, say yes to the invitation. I like that one. You never know where they're going to lead. So, with that, Amanda, I want to thank you very much for your time and energy tonight, your knowledge.
Thank you.
Um, oh, we've got a couple. Let's see. We've just got some thank yous coming in, another thank you. So we've got thank yous coming in. So again, thank you, and I look forward to again seeing you in the future. And if there's ever anything we can do for you, by all means, please ask. So